The Book of Happiness, Editor's Afterward. Before I begin reading the Editor's Afterward, this is Carla speaking, there's also a translator's afterword called A Voyage of Self-Discovery. I read it personally myself. It's very long and it's very tedious, and I myself do not feel compelled to read it. But I want to say I highly, highly recommend you, whoever's listening to these books, to try and get a copy of it, a physical copy, for you to read yourself. Like I said before, I got these from the library, and it's a good resource to use until these books come back into print, which will begin happening very soon. They will be back in print and available in the United States very soon. But in the meantime, you can get it from the library, and I recommend you reading it in your own mind, in your own voice, and being able to pause whenever you want, and being able to be surrounded by the woods. I'm doing the best I can to convey what I can through my own voice and through my own knowing. But it's really best if you can understand it for yourself. I think the translator's afterword, A Voyage to Self-Discovery, would be very beneficial for some people to read, but I myself find it sort of redundant, but I do think it would behoove a lot of people to read it. However, I'm not going to share it here because I don't have the time or the desire, to be perfectly honest, but I do have the time and the desire to share the editor's afterward, so that's what I'm going to do. But I recommend you read the books on your own anyway, and you can read this yourself by checking it out at the library. All right. Papa, which do you like better? Your computer or us, your family? My daughter, Lada, inquired of me one morning as I was sitting at work in my home office. What? Of course I like you better. Why? I replied, still glued to the screen. It's just that you spend all day long in front of a computer, but I'd rather you play with me or come see the pumpkins that Mama and I planted. Even when we go for a walk all together, all you can do is think about your work. You barely notice us. Well, that's true, I admitted, but I do need to earn money too, to pay for the piece of land we plant our garden on, for example. In other words, to afford things that are important in life. That's nonsense, Papa, she protested. It's all arranged like that on purpose, so as to make you think that everything important in life you can buy for money, to make you think that money is the most important thing of all. As I turned to face her, Lada looked me straight in the eye and added, tugging at my sleeve, You know, Papa, I really feel you need to come with me to my treehouse. I'll teach you there 3 lessons on how to live happily ever after, without money. Seeing the seriousness of the issue, I rose from the desk. Lada took me by the hand and escorted me to her green classroom. Half an hour later, she finished delivering her 3 lessons and made sure I grasped their key concepts. Lada surprised me with a fresh demand. Now, before you go, you must promise me that you shall never share what I have just taught you with anybody. How come? I queried. If the path you outlined to me really can lead people to happiness, I thought you would want to encourage me to tell others about it. Don't you know what happened with the Book of Happiness? What Book of Happiness? I've never heard of it. Lada crossed her hands on her knees and sighed and began telling me the story. Once upon a time, in a large city with dirty, polluted air, there lived a man who had lost his happiness. It seemed as though he had searched for it everywhere, including behind the sofa and under his desk, but happiness was nowhere to be seen. It occurred to the man that his cat might have taken his happiness outside and hid it somewhere, so he searched all around his apartment block, but he found nothing. Exhausted by the search, he decided to spend the following day, his day off, in the woods picking mushrooms. And so he did. He put on his big rubber boots and his backpack, took a knife and a large basket woven of willow twigs, and headed off. He had a very good day, and even forgot his grief over the lost happiness. By the time the sun was setting, his basket was so full of large mushrooms that it was hard to lift off the ground. The man was ready to go home, but now he couldn't find his way out of the forest. There was no visible path. He tried going in one direction, which he hoped would lead him out onto the paved road, but ended up in a swamp. He had no electric torch, no flashlight, and in the fading twilight, it was hard to see the way. So the man decided to spend the night in the forest and try to find his way home the following day. He made a bed out of dry pine needles under a tall pine tree, but put his backpack under his head for a pillow and tried to go to sleep. But the mosquitoes attacked him, putting sleep out of the question, so he just lay there, immersed in his thoughts, and finally he drifted off into a dream. The man awoke suddenly in the middle of the night. The forest was dark and quiet all around, but off in the distance, over to one side, he could make out what seemed to be a light glistening midst the branches. Thinking it could be a house or a lamppost on the road, the man picked himself up and walked in the direction of the light, slowly making his way through the darkness. After a while, he found himself emerging from the dense bushes into a glade. There was no house or lamppost anywhere in sight, but in the center of the glade was a moss-covered hillock, radiating a soft golden light. As the man approached the hillock, he saw an old book in a leather binding lying on the top. The light was coming from the book. The gold lettering on the cover read, "The Book of Happiness." He opened it and began to read. The book opened with a promise to show the reader how to find his happiness. Wow, this is exactly what I need, thought the man as he hefted the heavy tome from the moss and hurried out of the glade, taking the book with him. Perhaps it was the light coming from the book, perhaps it was his own insight, but he now felt confident as to which way he should go. And indeed it was not long before he found the path, then the paved road, and began walking along the empty nighttime highway in the direction of the town, his mushroom-filled basket in one hand and the Book of Happiness in the other. Dawn was breaking in the sky when he reached the outskirts of the city and, soon afterward, his home. Despite his heavy load, he felt neither tired nor sleepy. He put the basket down by the front door, took off his rubber boots, and plunged onto the sofa, and immersed himself in reading. He finished the whole book that same day, and it delivered on its promise. It brought him his happiness back. His happiness turned out to be lying behind the bookshelf, the only place he had not looked when searching for it. Presently he remembered that at one time he had indeed put his happiness on top of this bookshelf to save space in his small flat. Then he had added more books on top, which apparently pushed the happiness over and caused it to fall behind. When the man, following the instructions from the book, regained his happiness, it was all covered in dust, hair and cockroach feces, and he wiped it clean and it began to look new once more. So as to not lose it again, he decided to carry it with him all the time. He attached it to a watch chain he bought specifically for this purpose, and now he carried his happiness in his pocket. For weeks and days he found himself in a state of bliss and joy, but seeing the unhappy people all around him, on the sidewalks of the streets, in offices, and shops, he couldn't help but go back in his thought to the very last statement contained in the book, namely, "You shall not show this book to others." But just why, he thought, can't I share the Book of Happiness with others to make them happy? This can't be fair. See how much suffering and injustice there is in the world. Gradually, he contemplated the world around him. His feeling of happiness began to give way to a sense of disquietude, which over time became unbearable. Eventually, the man resolved to trying to share the book with just one man, a fellow worker who had spent his week compiling some sort of production reports on his computer, who looked particularly lean and unhappy. And so one day he brought the book with him to work and, toward the end of their shift, entered his workmate's cubicle. Explaining its significance, he lent the book to him for just one night, on the earnest promise that he would return it the next morning. That night, as he was going to sleep, lying in his bed and clasping his chained happiness to his chest, he felt blissful and fulfilled once more at the thought of sharing the path to happiness with even one fellow human being. The next morning, however, a sticky feeling of unease crept into him when he saw that his workmate that he had lent the book to the night before was not in his office. The man managed to bear this uncertainty until noon, trying to console himself with the thought that his friend must be finishing the last page of the book at home and would appear at the end of the corridor at any moment. As this did not happen by the lunch break, the man obtained his colleague's home address from the manager, who has been trying to reach him by phone the whole morning without success, and ran over to his place. There he found the door of the apartment wide open and his workmate gone. With him was gone, too, the Book of Happiness. At first the man found it hard to live with the nagging thought that he himself had not heeded the book's warning and was now to blame for its disappearance. But as the days turned to weeks and weeks into months, the sensation of loss gradually wore down, and life returned to normal. Then one morning, a year later, as the man was walking to the office, he sensed a strange agitation in the air. Everywhere, people could be seen shouting and running, and a huge queue had formed in front of the neighborhood bookstore. With a dark feeling of foreboding, the man made his way through the crowd to the bookshop window where, lo and behold, 100 copies of the latest sensational release were on display. He gasped as he read, in large golden letters on the cover of each book, "The Book of Happiness." At this moment, the store window had lost its ability to withstand the pressure of human bodies leaning against it, and it shattered. Pieces of broken glass showered down on the crowd. A moment later, a flood of people rushed to the display and emptied it. Dozens of people were now running away from the bookstore, each clasping a volume to their chest. One of these people was the man who had found this book more than a year ago in the forest. He rushed back to his apartment and leafed through the prize. There was not a shred of doubt left. This was an exact reprint of his book, apparently made from the copy stolen a year earlier by his workmate. Strange as it may seem, though, the man did not feel angry at him, but rather quivered in excited anticipation as to what would come next. For the next few days, the whole city was caught up in a reading frenzy. Nobody seemed to go to work or even go outdoors. The whole populace, young and old, were staying home and reading the amazing yet simple revelations of the Book of Happiness. And yes, more than one soul puzzled over the last sentence in the book: "You shall not show this book to others." They questioned themselves as to why this restriction was imposed, and more importantly, why the book had gained such tremendous circulation despite the reservation. But the general welfare resulting from the wide distribution of the book and its ideas was so palpable that these questions were soon forgotten. For the next 2 weeks, few businesses were open in the city as all citizens joined in a spontaneous festival to celebrate their new awareness and congratulate each other on the new era that the discovery of this remarkable book had ushered upon them. And when the people did not return to their workplaces, they were so overfilled with happiness that they took to their routine tasks with joyous enthusiasm. Bakers were baking tastier bread, the builders were laying stronger foundations for new buildings, and the policemen became more polite than ever before, while not just crime, but even traffic accidents seemed to completely disappear overnight. Weeks passed. The whole city and the surrounding countryside were transformed in such a remarkable, beneficial fashion that everyone was going to bed with smiles on their faces and excited anticipation of what new joys the next day would bring. And only the man who had originally discovered the book seemed to have any recollection of the warning it contained in its final line, yet the warning, even for him, seemed to pale into insignificance. Months went by, and he came out of his apartment block one morning into the blossoming of the spring, His ears were blasted by the sound of nearby police sirens, which no one had heard for a very long time. He hurried around the corner just in time to see two policemen shove an arrested felon into a patrol car and take off. The elderly lady left standing on the pavement was explaining to the passers-by that a young delinquent had assaulted her and tried to wrench her happiness from her. Her attacker had complained that she possessed more of it than he himself. The next day, a similar incident started to take place all over the city. More and more people began to suspect their neighbors, colleagues, or just passers-by of usurping a large portion of happiness that they were entitled to. Before long, all hell broke loose. Shooting began in the streets and neighborhoods. People were murdered for the tiny pieces of happiness they were desperately trying to cling to. The police department was overwhelmed. Days later, the police themselves joined the trend and raided homes to carry out whatever happiness remained for government needs. Rumors had it, however, the police were keeping the confiscated happiness for their personal greed and even fighting over it amongst themselves. A large portion of the populace fled the distressed city. Most of the businesses closed, and of the few individuals who remained, nobody so much as cared even to remove the rotting corpses of the slain men, women, and children from the streets and squares that just a few weeks ago had been home to, as it had seemed at the time, boundless happiness. As the man who had originally found the Book of Happiness in the woods was making his way stealthily along a completely deserted avenue leading to the city's main square, he suddenly heard the squeaking of brakes, a lone gunshot, the clapping of car doors, and the receding noise of a motor. When it finally died away in the distance, he mustered his strength and turned the corner into the plaza where the incident had happened only moments earlier. There, by the fountain, lay the man who had stolen the original copy of the book a year ago, in a pool of fresh blood nearby. The hefty, leather-bound volume opened to the last page. You shall not show this book to others. Centuries went by. Wind and water had eaten away stone, concrete, and metal. Paved streets and squares had given way to trees and meadows. Virtually nothing now betrayed the traces of the former city, concealed as it was in a lush, dense forest. The few ruins that remained had been fenced off and designated as historical monuments, occasionally drawing the odd tourist group from a faraway urban center. One day, a visitor with a basket woven from willow twigs separated from his group and, lured by the most beautiful mushrooms he had ever seen, wandered deep into the forest off the beaten path. Late in the afternoon, as he was crossing a large glade on his way back to the tourist camp, he stumbled over something in the high grasses. He reached down and brought up a thick book in a leather binding with golden lettering. The Book of Happiness, read the title. Wow, thought the man, this must be a real oldie, and probably worth a fortune. Hiding it from his companions, he returned to the camp, and when alone in his tent, took out the book, opened it, and started reading. He read all through the night, feeling no drowsiness nor fatigue. When he emerged from his tent in the morning, the world presented itself to him in a new and happy light. There's just one thing I cannot grasp, he thought. Just why does it say, you shall not show this book to others? Lotta finished her account, and we spent some time sitting there quietly without saying a word, listening to the breeze ruffling through the treetops and the crickets chirping in the grass. Do you know what the surest way to keep a secret is? Lotta finally asked, breaking the silence. No idea, I confessed. What is it? To forget it. Then she opened the palm of her hand in which, it turned out, she had been clasping all the while 3 little round clumps rolled from some kind of herb. But I have an even better solution, one especially for you, she continued. This is a special kind of grass that helps keep secrets. Go ahead and eat these clumps. If you eat enough of them, you'll still be able to remember the 3 lessons I taught you, but you will not be able to share them with others. If you eat too many of them, you'll forget everything I told you. Either way, you won't be able to share them with others. How much is enough? If I eat all 3, will I remember the lessons myself? I inquired. That, Lotta observed, you will find out for yourself after you've eaten them. Noticing our prolonged absence, my wife, Ira, came looking for us in the far corner of the garden. And just what might you be doing here? She asked with a smile, finally spotting us under the tree. I hesitated, looking at my wife and daughter by turns as I swallowed down the last bit of the 3rd clump. We were playing treehouse. I see. Ira gave me an understanding look and started on her way back to the house. Come in when you're hungry. Lunch is ready. Though I gather you've just had some snacks. Hey, Mama, Lotta called out after her. Do you happen to know what's the most important thing in life? I returned and confidently replied, life is. Wow, you've got it right this time. Lotta jumped up and clapped her hands for joy. Then she turned to me, beaming with pride and delight at the degree of mutual understanding our family had achieved. I hope those 3 clumps were just enough. December 19th, 2007, Maui, Hawaii, USA. Leonid Sharashkin. This is Carla's note here. I don't think there's anything wrong with sharing the secret of happiness myself, but I do think it is important for each person to find their own path there. True happiness is not something people would go around slaughtering each other for. I don't think it's a physical thing. I get what the story was trying to convey, however, why the hell would Leonid Sharashkin have translated these or edited these books if he genuinely believed that? So, anyway, enough thoughts. Be well.